Ominous, supernatural, and curiosity-provoking is the lore behind Gorillaz. This four-person band consists of frontman, vocalist, and pianist 2D, self-proclaimed leader and bassist Murdoch, possession-prone drummer Russell, and the military-trained amnesiac guitarist Noodle. Described here are the series of events leading up to and immediately following the creation of Gorillaz. Prehistory 2D. Stuart Harold Tuspot was born to a fairground operator father, David, and a nurse mother, Rachel, on the 23rd of May, 1978. He was raised in Crawley, Newtown. The boy's childhood was largely uneventful, barring a few unfortunate incidents. At the age of 11, Stuart fell out of a tree and hit his head. The accident caused him to lose his hair, which grew back as a shade of blue. Furthermore, Stuart developed chronic migraines, which his nurse mother would treat with painkillers. This would eventually lead to habitual painkiller use. In time, the boy would gain a reputation of being rather unintelligent, but he was kind and had a love of movies and music. He specifically had a deep interest in zombie movies. As for music, he favored synth-pop group The Human League. Stuart would be educated at St. Wilfrid School, where he received fairly good grades despite a lack of both intelligence and motivation. Stuart did, however, show interest in various sound-producing electronics such as stylophones, keyboards, drum machines, and cassettes. On the 15th of August 1997, Stuart Pott was 19 years old and working his part-time job at Uncle Norm's Organ Emporium, a keyboard store. He would soon have a life-altering encounter with a man named Murdoch Nichols. Prehistory. Murdoch. Murdoch Alphonse Nichols was born on June 6, 1966, with some mystery surrounding the location. It was rumored that he had been born in a halfway house for the sick, needy, and the incredibly bored, named the Belphegor Sanatorium. To say the boy had a rough childhood would certainly be an understatement. The infant was dumped on the doorstep of his father. As Sebastian Jacob Nichols returned home from the pub, he discovered a raven perched upon a stroller that contained the infant. Unfortunately for the baby Murdoch, Sebastian was an abusive, spiteful drunk who would exploit his children for drinking money. Murdoch put up with years of abuse and neglect before he was shipped off to school. As a boy, Murdoch's personality could be described as unpleasant. He was unhygienic, unruly, and had a habit of playing malicious pranks. Even with his generally repulsive traits, the boy had a high amount of charisma and could often get others to see things his way. Nevertheless, a boy by the name of Tony Chopper bullied Murdoch with name-calling such as the ever-so-witty Nerdoch. Murdoch eventually retaliated, claiming that Tony would grow to only be employable as a sign twirler who would eventually be fired and replaced by a bucket of soil. Of course, Tony Chopper took offense to this and struck Murdoch in the nose, fracturing it for what would be the first but not the last time. Murdoch's brother Hannibal would break his nose for a second and third time due to a disagreement over music. Murdoch would continue through childhood committing various crimes such as larceny, arson, and fraud. Eventually, he would discover the music of Black Sabbath and delve into Satan worship with an Acme-branded do-it-yourself Satanist kit. Outside of school, Murdoch's father would force him to participate in humiliating performances at a local pub's talent competition. Of course, any prize money would simply fund the father's drinking habits. During this time, Murdoch decided he would become a musician and only take the stage for himself. He vowed to wreak havoc on this world of buffoons. Murdoch became a full-fledged Satanist and entered into an agreement with the devil. He would give up his immortal soul to become a famous rock star. With this deal, Murdoch obtained the devil's bass guitar, El Diablo, and he changed his middle name from Alphonse to Faust. With his ill-gotten newfound talent, Murdoch began playing in a number of bands, none of which gained popularity. He came to the realization that he would need to find someone with a more conventional vocal talent than that which he possessed. In his early 30s, Murdoch was unemployed but spent the money he had on running an underground child fighting circuit. It was during this time that he contracted necrotizing fasciitis, which is used to explain his greenish skin color. His criminal activity continued with the theft of a Vauxhall Astra automobile. With the stolen car, Murdoch and his fellow criminals targeted Uncle Norm's Organ Emporium with the intention of stealing music equipment that they had in stock. Prehistory. First encounter. Murdoch crashed the stolen Vauxhall Astra through the front window of Uncle Norm's Organ Emporium and collided with Stuart Pott's face. The collision put Stuart Pott into a coma and gave him a hyphema, or 8-ball fracture, on his left eye. Stuart's left iris filled with blood, giving it a black coloration. Murdoch was arrested and sentenced to 30,000 hours, approximately 3.5 years of community service, along with the requirement of being the caretaker of the comatose Stuart Pott. 1 year later, Murdoch was driving in a parking lot with a catatonic Stuart in the rear seat. Murdoch started performing donut drifts with his vehicle in an attempt to impress some nearby ladies. The maneuver sent Stuart flying through the windshield of the vehicle, smashing his head into a curb. This fractured Stuart's right eye in a fashion similar to his left. Stuart woke from his coma and turned to face Murdoch. Murdoch saw the blue-haired, black-eyed look that Stuart now possessed and knew he would make for a great frontman. Murdoch recruited Stuart into his band as a keyboardist and vocalist. Murdoch also gave Stuart the nickname 2D to match the 2 dents in Stuart's head from the pair of injuries caused by Murdoch. Stuart loved the nickname, and even took to signing formal paperwork as 2D. Murdoch began to search for a studio that the fledgling band could record in. He accessed a website called Gigantic Disused Haunted Studios in the Middle of Nowhere.com and noticed Kong Studios' owner was searching for a caretaker. Murdoch was suspicious that the owners were looking to ditch the place, but went to Kong Studios regardless. Upon arrival, the owners threw the keys to Kong Studios at Murdoch and fled screaming. 2D and Murdoch moved into the studio, where they began searching for a drummer. Prehistory. Russell Hobbs. On June 3, 1975, Russell Hobbs was born in Brooklyn, New York to a middle-class family. As a child, he experienced a string of possessions. One could say he was attuned to the frequency of wayward spirits. He attended the Xavier School for Young Achievers, a private school in New York. One night at the campus dorms, Russell was possessed by a demon. He swelled to double his size and threw his classmates around like rag dolls. The demon possessing Russell wrote, "Russell Hobbs was here," in blood on the school's wall. For this, Russell was expelled from the Xavier School. The possession event dropped Russell into a coma for nearly 4 years, where a priest named Father Merrin was able to exorcise the demon from his soul. At this point, Russell regained consciousness and the demon was gone, but his old school still refused to re-enroll him. So Russell attended Brooklyn High School and fell in with a crew of DJs, beatboxers, MCs, street musicians, and rappers. He found a particular kinship with a boy named Dell. They were great friends and they were inseparable. One rainy night, Russell, Dell, and their friends were parked at a 7-Eleven store when they heard the sound of a Humvee approaching. The Humvee pulled around the back of Russell's vehicle and a group of gang members hopped out. They were all dressed in red hoods, except for one person wearing a black hood. They brandished Uzis and opened fire. Russell managed to survive the shooting by hitting the floor of the truck. Dell and his other friends, however, had all been killed. Russell looked another time at the gang member in the black hood and saw Death Incarnate, the Grim Reaper. The image was burned into his mind. At this moment, the spirits of Russell's slain friends entered his body. In doing so, Russell acquired all of their musical talent. This ghostly possession caused Russell's eyes to turn pure white. After the massacre, Russell's parents feared for his safety and sent him to live in England with his uncle. Russell brought his legendary hip-hop machine with him to London and began working at Big Rick Black's record shack. Murdoch had heard about a drummer, a hip-hop maestro who carried the souls of his dead friends. Murdoch knew that this man would be perfect for his band and paid a visit to Big Rick Black's record shack. Murdoch asked Russell for an obscure record, and as soon as Russell turned his back, Murdoch placed a bag over his head and abducted him. The drummer was brought to Kong Studios, where Murdoch played him some songs. The music he played was good enough to convince Russell to join up. The band now consisted of an iconic frontman, a devil-empowered bassist, a drummer with the musical ability of multiple men, and then there was 2D's girlfriend on guitar. Paula Cracker was the initial guitar player for the band, and had started dating 2D when he worked at the Organ Emporium. 2D convinced her to join up and play for the band. However, things turned sour one night when Russell caught Murdoch and Paula up to no good in the Kong Studios bathroom. For the betrayal, Russell promptly broke Murdoch's nose 5 more times, bringing the total to 8. Paula left the band, and they needed a new guitarist. Murdoch called a local paper to place an ad, but the instant he hung up the phone, Kong Studios received a delivery. A 10-foot crate had been delivered to the studio. The contents were quite interesting. Prehistory. Noodle. Noodle was one of 23 children who were raised from birth as an elite secret military team for the Japanese government. She was trained by the strict Mr. Kyuzo. Mr. Kyuzo trained the children in every known martial art, taught them every language, and educated them in electronics. Each child was also given training in an individual skill. Noodles was music. She learned to play all instruments, but was specialized in guitar. Still, the purpose of the training was centered around warfare. The children were incredibly powerful and valuable soldiers, so for security purposes, they were taught a phrase that could wipe their memories as well as one that could return them later. Even with these protocols in place, the children were deemed too dangerous by the government, and Mr. Kyuzo was ordered to stop their training. Furthermore, the government dispatched a team to destroy all evidence of the program, including the children themselves. Mr. Kyuzo chose instead to smuggle Noodle out of the program. He wiped her memory and sent her to England in a shipping crate to audition for Murdoch's band. The box arrived at Kong Studios, and out of the box sprung a 3'2" child holding a Les Paul guitar. The girl unleashed an impressive guitar riff, performed a 20-foot high jumping karate kick, and bowed, saying Noodle. Of course, now she was an amnesiac. Regardless, she had earned the job. The group turned down all other applicants, including the notable Jimmy Manson. The band was now complete and was named Gorillaz. Phase 1. Celebrity Takedown. Label signing. The newly formed band began writing and rehearsing their music. Their first song was titled Ghost Train. Murdoch promptly packaged some pictures of the band along with a recording and sent them to Whiffy Smiffy at EMI Records. And just like that, they gained fast popularity with many record labels. On November 5th, 1998, the band played a gig at the Camden Brown House. They played with energy and confidence. Many record label representatives came to the performance. After playing just one song, Punk, the representatives began rushing the stage to sign Gorillaz before their competitors. The commotion was broken up with a shotgun blast in the air. Whiffy Smiffy had brought with him a sawed-off shotgun to scare away his competitors. He signed Gorillaz that night after they played just one song. Gorillaz were placed on the Parlophone label, sharing company with the Beatles, Kylie Minogue, and Radiohead. The next day, EMI had a signing party for Gorillaz. At the party, Whiffy introduced Gorillaz to Damon Albarn, frontman of Blur, as something of a paternal guide through the music industry. He helped the band avoid pitfalls and even helped produce some tracks. During this era, Tootie started dating Rachel Stevens from S Club 7, but that relationship soured as Murdoch made numerous unwelcome advances toward her. Kong Studios' renovation and uncovered history. Now that Gorillaz were being heavily funded, they were able to improve the decrepit Kong Studios with state-of-the-art equipment. The band filled the studio with games, toys, and cameras they used to interact with their fans via their award-winning website. Though the band now worked and lived in the studio, there wasn't much information about the building's history and previous ownership. That is, until Noodle found a hidden library within the building. Apparently, the site was once a meeting spot for druids of the Goat Clan. A cemetery was created below the hilltop. The first building on the hill was constructed in 1665 to assist in the burial of those who died in the Great Plague. Sometime later, in 1749, the building was reconstructed by a hedonist named Sir Emmerich Kong, who used the space for debauchery and physical satisfaction for his King Kong Club. Eventually, a landfill would be developed in the area, which causes the studio to smell horrible in the summer heat. A group from the Hells Angels biker gang came to use the building as their clubhouse. In 1993, they hosted an event for their fellow bikers. Unfortunately, they all perished in a meth-fueled explosion and the subsequent fire. With all the death and bad vibes surrounding the studio, it was largely vacant until the band moved in. Kong and Gorillaz were united, and the band eventually became accustomed to the hauntings and supernatural events that occurred at the studio. The band used Kong Studios to record their first album. The album titled Gorillaz. On November 31st, 1998, Gorillaz began recording at Kong Studios. They recorded 40 songs and then reduced the number to their 15 best. With word spreading about the hot new group, potential superstar collaborators began lining up to feature on the album. Damon recommended the help of producer Dan Nakamura, the Automator, to assist with the track Clint Eastwood. Dan suggested replacing Murdoch's vocal section with a rap. This suggestion, mixed with Russell's possession and Kong Studios' supernatural setting, triggered an event later replicated in the Clint Eastwood music video. Russell temporarily went comatose as the spirit of Dell emerged from his body and provided the band with a career-making contribution. After the band's ghostly encounter, Dan suggested they move their recording to a sunnier setting. The coast of Jamaica helped Gorillaz brighten up their dark and bleak album in progress. 10 months of work produced their self-titled album, Gorillaz. After the album's completion, Noodle and Russell moved back to the UK to prep for their music video shoot of Tomorrow Comes Today, while Murdoch and 2D stayed in Jamaica an extra day to relax. Murdoch fell out of a tree, injuring his back, nearly causing them to cancel the shoot, but they managed. The initial director of the music video was Paulo Schimbaccio, a senile man, psychotic, possessive, and fully armed. It took the stealthy work of Jamie Hewlett and Matt Wakeham to fix the project without Schimbaccio noticing. Gorillaz and Jamie would enter a partnership, with Jamie heading up the visual side of the band. Jamie signed on as the director for the following music video for Clint Eastwood. Murdoch suggested that they film it in the graveyard near Kong Studios. The video depicts Del the Ghost Rapper emerging from Russell while the band is barraged with earthquakes, lightning, and zombie apes. The zombie ape dance troupe were employed to recreate the dance of Michael Jackson's Thriller. However, the troupe's leader Florence claims that the routine belonged to them, as they had been doing the undead zombie ape shuffle since the 50s. Michael Jackson allegedly ripped off the undead apes. Regardless, in the video, Noodle fights off the undead apes, who fade to dust as the night ends. This music video thrusts the band into global popularity. With an album and a couple music videos complete, there came another test, a live show. The Camden Brownhouse gig had ended only after one song, so now it was time to prove their true performing ability. They rehearsed for a month and performed in London at King's Cross Scala. The band considered the event a success, though it was met with criticism. Soon after the show, the album was set to release to the public. In a marketing giveaway to drive album sales, a set of keys to Murdoch's Winnebago were offered as a prize. The prize was won by Dr. Wurzel, and unsurprisingly, the mobile home was stolen. At this time, Wurzel was able to leak the band's then unreleased first song, Ghost Train. Still, the album dropped and was met with fantastic reception. The album sold out stateside in a week, even after tripling their initial sale projection. Russell noted that ever since this point, Gorillaz did less music and more interviews. As the band was filming an interview on the set of their next music video, Murdoch's stolen Winnebago drives by, which Russell is quick to point out. The initial plan was to create a video for the song 5/4, but they went instead with 19-2000 due to 5/4's spikier tone. This video featured the group driving together in their dune buggy, the Geep, on the freeway. The Geep was designed and built by Russell and contained a concealed armory of weapons. In the video, the Geep eventually comes across a massive elk, which Jamie hired and placed in their way without telling the band. He intended to use the footage as a metaphor for a block in the creative process. Murdoch, who wasn't informed of any of that, took the opportunity to shoot 2 missiles at the elk. The elk then sneezes, returning the rockets to their sender and giving the director enough footage to complete the video. The song charted at number 6 in the UK the same week that an X Factor winner charted at number 1. This was the exact type of manufactured celebrity that Murdoch and by extension Gorillaz had aimed to overtake. They were doing well, but they would have to do more. The band toured various countries and cities such as Paris, Dublin, and Osaka. While in Osaka, the amnesiac Noodle felt a sense of homesickness. She felt like an outsider in her home country and started having dreams and visions about her past. The band's reception in Japan was less than what they expected when compared with the West. Apparently, there were promotional differences between the countries when it came to album releases, so Gorillaz released G-Sides as a reintroduction of Gorillaz to the Japanese market. It was a successful album, especially since it was mainly a collection of remixes. In 2001, the band would be met with award nominations. Murdoch, on behalf of Gorillaz, would turn down a nomination for the Mercury Prize due to its alleged curse. He would then go on to cause a profanity-riddled scene at the MTV Awards when they lost the Viewer's Choice Award, even though he had previously been assured they would win. Murdoch would later deny these events. Still, the band picked up 2 awards from MTV Europe for Best Song and Best Dance. For their third single, the band chose Rock the House, again sidelining 5/4 in the process. While working on the music video for the newest single, Jamie was also involved in a legal battle concerning the concept of Gorillaz. A virtual group named Doppelgangers brought up a lawsuit claiming that their idea had been ripped off by Gorillaz and Jamie, and they were asking for 50% ownership of the band. Furthermore, they wanted rights over any future thoughts that Jamie might have. The stress of the lawsuit manifested itself in the music video, with themes of the band being attacked. Jamie also mentioned that it was a strange choice for a single since 2D's vocals didn't appear on the track. Jamie took time off to deal with the lawsuit and left the remainder of the video's production to the band. Murdoch chose to include a scene where he deflects cannonballs with his reinforced underwear. Apparently Steve-O had shown him how to perform the stunt. The band continued on to film a series of promotional sketches named G-Bites. They chose a sketch format as a way to show their personality to their audience outside of the typical celebrity interview. These appearances gave Murdoch an interest in acting that he would later try to develop. The North America Tour. 2002 opened with an incredible performance at the British Music Awards. They had also been nominated for 6 awards, yet managed to win none. They promptly hopped a plane to their tour of North America. Upon arrival, Murdoch was instantly arrested for a crime he had committed 15 years previously. Allegedly, he had smuggled soil and livestock while he was holding someone else's gun. He had to be bailed out at $500,000. The majority of Gorillaz shows featured the band performing behind large wide screens with their shadows projected onto them. This was intended as a statement about the import of celebrity, or lack thereof. This was quite polarizing. Though this worked for the group when they were smaller, it began to backfire as it created a distance between the fans and the band. Some fans even felt as if they were being ridiculed. As the North American tour continued, the band changed their presentation so that the audience could see both them as well as their shadowed projections on the large white screens. With that, the issues were resolved and the tour was a success. A success on stage. Behind the scenes, there was trouble. There were inevitable pains sharing a tour bus with Murdoch. Murdoch on tour was a new animal. He was performing drunken satanic rituals in nearly every city they had stopped in. He caused one of the Gorillaz staff workers to quit after he came across a creature summoned by one of these rituals. He was not only aggravating the crew, but also the band members. Outside of the shows, Noodle had turned into a recluse. She had been experiencing flashbacks of her past, which were taking their toll on the young guitarist. The tour was ending in Mexico City, and Murdoch brashly claimed that the group was now bigger than Satan. Ironic, since his deal with Satan caused his success. Noodle was struggling with insomnia and nightmares, while 2D got food poisoning. Not to mention each member of the band was already running low on both energy and patience. The Mexico City show started 2 hours late, when a fan rushed the stage and caused Murdoch to fight him off with a swing of his bass guitar. Russell then passed out mid-set, causing another delay while he was treated. Fights began to break out in the restless crowd, and the concert was stopped again when a drunk circus tiger made its way through the venue's security team. After 2 more interruptions, a section of the stage collapsed after being rocked by a raucous crowd. Fans trapped by the stage props were unable to be freed for 2 days, which caused Murdoch visible amusement. The Mexico City show marked a dramatic reversal in Gorillaz' lucky streak. The movie. After the Mexico City show, Murdoch took stock of the state of the band. He knew either Russell or Noodle were likely to quit if they didn't keep working together, so he accepted an offer to make a movie, both to remain united and to take some time off to enjoy their hard work. The band moved into a house in the Hollywood Hills of LA. Russell had his reservations about the move from the beginning, as he would have preferred to return to Kong Studios and work on music. Noodle wasn't fond of the Hollywood locals or how they were treating people. Murdoch carelessly began throwing parties to attract celebrities with the intention of pitching his scripts. However, these events usually contained more partying than pitching. One particular guest, the unsettling 3-foot-tall man by the name of Jimmy Manson, repeatedly showed up to each party and would stay among the band for days. 3 party-filled months would pass without so much as a director being found for the movie. The bandmates began to press Murdoch to make progress. Murdoch impulsively chose a director, Mr. Alfred C. Klinker, over a game of pin the tail on the donkey, and they began shooting immediately. The director never provided a script and simply filmed a bunch of unrelated scenes for his animated action drama thriller horror comedy film. Noodle suspected that the director was making it up as they went. During the seemingly pointless but still exhausting film shoot, the band took one break to perform in Lisbon, where they were made aware of an album by Space Monkeys. It seemed the trio of Space Monkeys made their way into Kong Studios while the band was absent and stole Gorillaz' master tapes. They remixed them to a release in their own name. Murdoch understandably wasn't happy about this, and added them to his growing list of adversaries. Gorillaz flew back to LA and continued filming for Mr. Clinker, who of course had changed the direction of the film yet again. The band was fed up. They left the set. Furthermore, it turned out Clinker hadn't even filmed any of the months of work they had done. The sheer insanity of the director was reminiscent of Skinbaccio. Murdoch decided the group would make the movie themselves. He convinced Gorillaz to lock themselves in a hotel room and not exit until their script was complete. The group spent a month in close proximity pitching various ideas. Russell and Noodle suggested a film where an egotistical bass player develops a disease that feeds on his ego. The disease manifests with a boil on the skull. This not-so-subtle analogy to Murdoch's narcissistic behavior seemed to fly over the bassist's head. He asked how the movie would end, and Russell replied that part wasn't written yet. It would be up to the bass player to decide whether the disease would consume him and destroy his relationships, or if he could awaken from his overinflated self-opinion. The exhausted group continued trying to work on their script. Murdoch eventually reached a boiling point with 2D's asinine suggestions. He began to strangle the blue-haired frontman, while both Noodle and Russell urged him to stop. When Murdoch refused to release 2D, Noodle bit his hand, and Russell punched him in the head, briefly knocking him out. When Murdoch came to moments later, he felt humiliated by his bandmates. He shouted at 2D and claimed he couldn't carry the band any longer. He left the hotel room, left the band, ending the career of Gorillaz. Notes and trivia. 2D went to the same school as the members of the band The Cure. 2D's shirt in the Clint Eastwood music video reads "Virus" in a large letter T. This is a reference to the T-Virus from the Resident Evil games. Outside of the lore, Damon Albarn and Jamie Hewlett created Gorillaz because they were dissatisfied with the state of mainstream bands. At the time, record labels could put together a group of singers, call them a band, and generate plenty of revenue. This manufacturing of bands gave them the idea to fully manufacture a band, all the way down to the creation of the members themselves. This project evolved into exploring negative aspects surrounding celebrity. Most of the information in this video comes from Rise of the Ogre, a book by Damon Albarn and Cass Brown. Outro. Of course, the Gorillaz come back in later phases, and in the next phase there's something of a shift with the music videos, where instead of being creations that the characters are making, the videos are filming events as they happen to the characters. Personally, I think that stuff is cool and interesting, so I'm excited to work on more videos of Gorillaz lore. I should say that I'm excited to work on more lore videos in general, because I had intended to make more videos than I've been making, but sometimes you get busy. But anyway, thanks for watching. Have a good one.